Hi, it's Nick from the Run Testers, and this is our full review of the Garmin Instinct Solar. So the Instinct Solar is a pretty big update on the original Instinct, and it's got a pretty big price jump as a result. In the UK, it's going to cost £350, which is up from $270 for the original Instinct. And in the US, it's going to be $400 versus $300 for the original Instinct. And also, the original is now often reduced to under 200 quid, $200. So, it's a big price jump, but it really is a huge update to the watch, not just with these solar panels. Like with the Fenix 6 Solar, all you're getting is solar panels compared to the normal watch. With this, it's an entirely new watch, really. There's a new GPS chipset in there, there's a new heart rate monitor in there, and those are kind of just as important to the overall updates to the watch as the addition of these solar panels, which are all over the face of the watch, as you can see. They're a little bit shiny, they're kind of crammed in everywhere there to try and get as much kind of solar intensity into the watch as they can. The screen on the watch obviously is small, and it's also not a colour display, which doesn't really be too much, but I think you look at the stuff you get on the Forerunner range, even going down to some of the cheaper models, it's quite nice to kind of have that kind of feedback with a bit of colour. In general, the design is kind of that rugged, reinforced polymer look, the kind of plasticky look really, that's kind of a bit reminiscent of a Casio G-Shock. It really marks it out as kind of an outdoorsy watch compared to maybe the kind of more sleek Forerunner range, which is a little bit kind of flatter, a little bit, in my view, a bit more stylish, but others will disagree. It's just that kind of look, really, and whether you like it is kind of obviously a matter of personal taste. It's a fairly lightweight watch still, despite being quite chunky. It weighs 53 grams, which is heavier than something like the Forerunner 245, which are under 40 grams, but it's lighter than the Fenix. But yes, all round, it's that kind of rugged look for outdoorsy people, now with the addition of solar panels and a kind of whole lot more under the hood compared to its predecessor. Start of all the kind of usual features you'd expect on a kind of running watch, a Garmin. It's obviously got built-in GPS, can connect to Galileo and GLONASS satellites as well. It's got the heart rate monitor. It also has a pulse ox sensor in there for your blood oxygen saturation, which is now kind of a standard thing on watches these days. And it has Garmin's body battery feature, which kind of tells you your energy levels over the course of the day. It's also got some really good navigation features on it for this kind of mid-range watch. It doesn't have full maps like the Fenix, but you do get breadcrumb trails with turn-by-turn directions. And because it's got a barometric altimeter in it, it will give you the elevation profile of your route. So when you're flicking through your screens, you can kind of see how much climbing you have left over, all that kind of thing, which you don't get on something like the Forerunner 245, for example, which doesn't have the altimeter in it. What it doesn't have, though, is kind of training analysis, VO2 max estimates, all that kind of stuff that's really kind of standard now on Garmin's, even going down to the Forerunner 45, which is kind of well below £200. Obviously the intention is to separate this from the kind of Forerunner range, but it's quite poor that it's a £350 watch. It should have those training analysis things that are on cheaper Garmin's, in my opinion. Obviously, the most exciting new feature here is the solar panels and the solar charging you're getting from them. The Garmin lists the battery life without sun involved at 24 days or 30 hours of GPS. That jumps to 54 days and 38 hours of GPS if you're getting enough sun onto the watch. Also got the new power manager feature on the watch, which we saw in the Fenix 6 range, which allows you to kind of set what you want on, like in terms of heart rate monitoring or notifications, and you can see how much battery you can add by turning certain features off. So for example, on the Fenix, I will turn off loads of stuff at night just to extend the battery life, during the day. That's really important because there is a battery saver mode on this that in theory could extend the battery life indefinitely if you have enough sun. I found when I turn it on, even with everything off, it still quotes me something like 60, 70 days left, but I guess if you're constantly going out in the sun, it will be a bit better. It also has Garmin's Expedition mode, which can get you kind of a GPS activity with like 28 days of life. I've not really tried that, and that gets extended massively with solar to something like 68, 70 days. Again, it's not something I've tried, but yeah, there is those really ultra long life modes because you get with the new kind of power manager plus the solar power on the watch. In terms of judging how much sun you're getting, there's a solar intensity kind of widget, and you can add it to the watch screen in the kind of little circle on the front there. Just kind of get a quick at a glance view of how much sun you're getting. I was really interested at the start, and I could see like, oh, on cloudy days I'm actually getting some solar intensity, and sometimes it doesn't really match up with what you see overhead. It's more about, you know, the kind of strength of the UV and the sun coming through, I guess. But I've kind of stopped looking at it now. It got a bit boring after a while, but I guess it's quite exciting sometimes. What does that all add up to though in terms of real world results? So early on I was really impressed with the Instinct's battery life. I was kind of wearing it off and on because I had a few watches to review, and it was kind of lasting 2-3 weeks. But what I realised when I really put it through a full test of having it on my wrist the whole time during, you know, my normal training regime, it's not actually that astounding. So like I say, I've had a bit of a heat wave in the UK. That's over 30 degrees, which is a big heat wave for the UK. And I was using it for my normal training, so I run pretty much every day, kind of a few supportive sessions like kind of yoga and cycling and strength and stuff like that. And it lasted 10 days. And this was in the blazing sunshine. So, you know, that's pretty good. No, that is really very good actually. That's longer than the Phoenix. It's longer than my Forerunner 245. They'll both kind of do 7 days. But, you know, when you're seeing kind of 54 days with sun and stuff like that, I was maybe hoping for more like 2-3 weeks. I think if you're not using it as much, you will get that from the watch. So when I was using it earlier and I was only using it for maybe 3 or 4 runs a week, I was getting to kind of 2.5 weeks. I think its standby mode is very good. It doesn't use much battery at all when it's kind of sitting on your wrist or sitting in a drawer. But yeah, if you are using it for an intense training schedule, you're probably going to get kind of 10 days, maybe 2 weeks out of it. I've had the Instinct Solar for I think kind of a couple of months now, and I've used it quite a lot for my runs, and generally it's pretty good. Like, you get 4 stats on the screen, one of them goes in the little circle, and it's pretty clear to read in all conditions. The screen is obviously a little bit more cramped than something like the Phoenix or a Forerunner, where, you know, you haven't got all those cutouts. But it is still fine to read it in all conditions. I found the GPS accuracy to be really quite good actually, matched up against the FootPod and other watches. I always found that this was pretty reliable, and what I did notice with it is I didn't get such big jumps in current pace if I was using current pace when under tree cover as I would with something like the Phoenix even. So it might have just been like kind of a few lucky days, but overall I was quite impressed with distance accuracy and how that, you know, related to pace on the run. Heart rate tracking was about what you'd expect, which is to say, like a lot of watches, it's pretty good if you're doing steady runs, if you're sitting down. But if you start doing intervals or strides or something, and your heart rate's jumping up and down, it's slow to go up and it's slow to come down. You compare it to external sensors, that's still your best bet with accuracy using a chest strap. However, there's not so much point to do that with this, because a lot of the time you want that heart rate info, not just for your current session, but also to feed into all the kind of training analysis you get on kind of modern watches. And there's none of that here. Like I say, you don't get your recovery time, you don't get race predictions, you don't get VO2 max estimates. You're not really told the effect of your training. So I kind of ignored the heart rate on it in a way, because it just becomes back to kind of that simple running watch, which just logs your time, distance, and stuff like that. It's a bit of a shame. It's, you know, it's £350. You should have Garmin's training stuff in it, I think, for that kind of money, when it is on much cheaper watches, even if those watches are a dedicated training Forerunner range. Other stuff on it, you get structured workouts, stuff like that, intervals, it's all on there. Same as only on a Garmin, quite easy to follow, easy to set them up on Garmin Connect and, you know, kind of beam them over. And you can beam over courses, get good navigation from this watch. Like I say, there's elevation on there, which is useful for kind of, you know, judging your effort in a run with lots of hills on it. I will say, so I did a kind of 25k route on this watch, and it just had an absolute nightmare. So over the course of that run, it turned itself off twice. It kept pausing my run, so I'd look down and it would be paused and have to restart it. It lost the trail a couple of times. So I was really worried, basically. So since then I've been putting routes into it for every run, and it hasn't happened. And I did the exact same kind of 25k route the week after, and didn't have any problems. So I think it was a one-off. I always think with watches, once they go wrong once, it's very hard to trust them again. But yeah, I think it's fine. It was just a blip. But I was surprised that happened at all. It, you know, it doesn't really happen very often to me on watches. All in all, it's, you know, it's kind of got a lot of the standard stuff you'd expect on a mid-range Garmin at a kind of around that £300 mark. You get structured workouts, you get navigations, you get connectivity via both Bluetooth and ANT+. You get accurate tracking, you get semi-accurate heart rate, but you can connect a sensor. Just don't get all the training analysis stuff, which I think really is a big mark against the Instinct if you're viewing it as a pure runner's watch. So overall, the Garmin Instinct Solar kind of delivers on what you'd kind of expect from it. It's a slightly different product in Garmin's range, kind of like a Phoenix Lite, but separate to the kind of Forerunner watches. It's more designed as that kind of outdoorsy, rugged watch. It does that pretty well, and obviously the design is very different as well. If you really like this, there's not really any options in the Garmin range apart from the other Instinct, which this is a big jump on, I would say. The accuracy was there for me in terms of heart rate, generally was okay, and GPS was very good. Most of the kind of on-the-run features were fine. It's easy to read the screen. The battery life was slightly underwhelming in the end, but 10 days is still very good for a watch, really. It's just, I was kind of hoping for kind of 2-3 weeks, even when training every day with it, but 10 days is still very good. Like I say, it's better than the Phoenix that I wear, and it's kind of better than the 245. However, a big problem I have with it is the lack of the training analysis. Viewing it as purely as a runner, kind of it probably would rule it out for me just on that basis alone. When I know there are Garmins that do all this stuff, plus add the training analysis in, it's got that kind of altimeter for slightly better elevation, but I don't know, I'd rather have the training analysis, I think, myself. It is an interesting, actually, competitor to the Polar Grit X, a watch we reviewed on the channel, which we all really liked. It's a similar price point, but what you are getting with Polar, and this really demonstrates what I'm talking about, is this massive depth of kind of info on your training and recovery advice and really good sleep tracking, as well as the kind of on-the-run, navigation and accurate tracking. So do think that kind of, will make the Instinct struggle a bit in a way, because it's in a bracket of watches that are going to do a lot more for you on that front. At £350, and you'd expect that from it, really. And the Grit X also throw in a few bonus things like fueling advice and the kind of hill breakdown it does. So yeah, I think it might struggle a bit in that price bracket, just because the solar features are pretty great, but battery life is still, kind of 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on how much you use it. It's very good, but if you're purely going on battery life, there are still Coros watches out there that will last forever if you really want that. So yeah, I think it's a big enough upgrade on the original Instinct to make it, I think, worth paying the extra, just because of all the stuff you're getting under the hood as well as the solar panels. But I think there's probably still better value in the Forerunner range or the Polar Grit X or kind of stuff from other brands, just because Garmin has not given it the training features. So I thought we'd separate out this bit, as it's kind of the key comparison in the Garmin range, really, is should you get the Instinct Solar or the Forerunner 245, and they are really kind of designed to fill different kind of niches within Garmin's range. Obviously, the Instinct Solar it's got a very different design to start with. That's really going to come down to personal preference. I much prefer the kind of sleeker look of the Forerunner myself, but this is a look that some people really like. Also kind of demonstrates it kind of more outdoorsy design, and the kind of extra features you get on this all kind of are linked to that. So there's the altimeter, there's kind of slightly better navigation features that I've talked about, and there's obviously the solar panels for that big jump in battery life. Even with regular training, this is going to get 3 days more than the kind of Forerunner 245 in my experience. And if you're not training as regularly, the kind of gap only grows, just because in standby mode, this really doesn't lose much battery and obviously gains every time you kind of step into the sun. However, the Forerunner 245 is kind of street ahead on other things, in my opinion. It's a slightly more comfortable watch, but it's really that training analysis that I've talked about. It will, guide you on recovery. It tells you the effect of your training. It gives you a VO2 max estimate, the kind of race target times estimates, although I've never found those to be that accurate. There's a lot more on that end. It's a much more clever watch in terms of helping you guide your training than the Instinct, and it has got a slightly kind of larger screen that's a bit clearer to read. It's certainly, I think, a watch that regular runners will appreciate more for those features, as opposed to the kind of ones you get on here, which are things like battery life and maybe a bit more kind of elevation accuracy. Forerunner 245 is also lighter, and you can link it to a foot pod and get kind of running dynamics stuff on your Garmin if you're into that kind of thing. It's all kind of more built to kind of help your kind of regular training as a runner, I think, and that's something that I'd appreciate. And obviously, watching the run testers, it might be something you appreciate as well. Add in the fact that a 245 is cheaper than the Instinct Solar. It's kind of $250 if you don't want music, £300 if you do want music, which is another obviously big feature on the watch that isn't on the Instinct. So even if you're getting music, it's £50 less. Yeah, basically, really, you're losing a little bit of that kind of rugged, outdoorsy charm and battery life, but you are getting, I think, a much better training companion as a runner. So for me, it'll be the 245 hands down, but it does fill a slightly different niche, this, and if you want that outdoorsy watch, and if you are thinking about expeditions and stuff like that, where you're really going to maximise the benefit of this solar charging, then yeah, this is obviously a better option, but you are going to have to pay a little bit more for it.